The silence at Thunder Ridge Precision Academy was broken only by the distant crack of rifle fire echoing across the Montana Valley. What happened next would shatter every assumption about marksmanship, gender, and what's truly possible when skill meets determination. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sprawling compound of Thunder Ridge Precision Academy, one of America's most elite, long-range shooting facilities nestled in the rugged mountains outside Billings, Montana. The facility attracted serious marksmen from across the country, former military snipers, competitive shooters, and wealthy enthusiasts willing to pay premium rates for access to ranges that stretched beyond 1,200 yards into the wilderness. Sarah Mitchell arrived at the main lodge just as the morning briefing was concluding. 23 years old, barely 5'4", wearing faded jeans and a simple gray pullover that had seen better days. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she carried a worn canvas rifle case that looked like it had been purchased at a garage sale. Everything about her appearance suggested someone who had wandered into the wrong place entirely. The other participants were already gathered around the massive stone fireplace, examining topographical maps and discussing wind patterns with the kind of technical precision that marked experienced shooters. There was Marcus Hartwell, a former Marine Corps scout sniper whose arms were covered in military tattoos and whose reputation for 1,000-yard shots preceded him. Standing beside him was Dr. Richard Pemberton, a cardiovascular surgeon from Dallas who had spent six figures building a custom rifle setup and traveled to competitions across 3 states. Jake Morrison dominated the conversation with stories from his days as a Navy SEAL, gesturing dramatically as he described taking out Taliban fighters from impossible distances in Afghanistan. His custom rifle case bore the logos of multiple high-end manufacturers who sponsored his competitive shooting career. Next to him sat Tommy Richardson, a local rancher whose grandfather had been shooting these mountains for 60 years and who claimed he could read wind patterns better than any meteorologist. The group's attention turned as Sarah approached the registration table. The conversation didn't exactly stop, but it shifted into that particular type of amused murmuring that occurs when people encounter something they find entertaining in an unexpected way. "First time at Thunder Ridge?" asked Elena Rodriguez, the Academy's head instructor, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s whose weathered face spoke of decades spent outdoors. She had earned her position through sheer competence in an industry that hadn't always welcomed women, and her reputation for developing precision shooters was respected throughout the community. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied quietly, signing her name on the liability waiver with careful handwriting. Marcus glanced over from his position by the fireplace. "What kind of experience did you have, miss? This isn't exactly a beginner's course we're running here." His tone wasn't hostile, exactly, but carried the assumption that she was clearly out of her depth. "Some," Sarah answered, not elaborating as she completed the paperwork. Dr. Pemberton adjusted his expensive shooting glasses and peered at her equipment case. "What are you shooting?" "Hopefully something with enough power for the distances we'll be working today. We'll be engaging targets out to 800 yards minimum. That's serious long-range work that requires serious equipment." Sarah unzipped her case to reveal a rifle that drew immediate attention, but not the kind she might have hoped for. It was a Remington 700, probably 20 years old, with a basic scope that appeared to be standard hunting equipment rather than the sophisticated optics everyone else was carrying. The stock showed wear marks from years of use, and the barrel had the dull finish that comes from countless cleaning sessions. Tommy Richardson let out a low whistle that wasn't entirely complimentary. "Well, that's certainly practical. Looks like my dad's old deer rifle. Hope you're not planning to compete with the big boys using that setup." "I'm just here to shoot," Sarah said simply, closing the case and slinging it over her shoulder. Jake Morrison had been studying her with the analytical eye of someone accustomed to assessing potential threats and allies. "You military?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "No, sir." "Police? Competition background?" "No, sir." "Hunting guide? Ranch work?" "No, sir." The silence that followed was filled with unspoken questions. What exactly was a young woman with no apparent credentials doing at an elite precision shooting academy, carrying equipment that wouldn't have been impressive at a local gun range? Elena checked her watch and gathered the group's attention. "All right, people, let's move out to Range 7. We'll start with some basic positioning, and then work our way out to distance. Today's goal is consistency at 600 yards before we push anyone out to 800. As they walked across the compound toward the range, the conversation naturally fragmented into smaller groups. Sarah found herself walking slightly apart from the others, not because she was being deliberately excluded, but because the social dynamics had already established themselves. The experienced shooters formed a loose cluster, trading stories and technical advice, while she remained quietly focused on the path ahead. "Think she'll make it through the morning?" Marcus murmured to Jake, quiet enough that Sarah couldn't hear but loud enough that his amusement was clear. $50 says she packs up after the first target, Jake replied. This isn't exactly a hobby for dainty types. Dr. Pemberton was examining his equipment for the third time, making minute adjustments to his scope settings. I respect that she's willing to try, but there's a reason this sport is dominated by men. It takes a certain type of physical and mental toughness that most women simply don't possess. The recoil alone from these calibers. Tommy nodded sagely. My wife tried shooting with me once. Bruised her shoulder so bad she couldn't lift her arm for a week. Some things are just natural male territory. Range 7 stretched across a natural valley, with shooting positions carved into the hillside and targets visible as distant specks at measured intervals. The 800-yard targets were barely visible even with binoculars, appearing as small steel plates that would ring when struck. The setup was designed to challenge even experienced marksmen, requiring not just accuracy, but understanding of ballistics, wind drift, and environmental factors that could affect bullet trajectory. Elena began setting up the spotting scope, while the participants claimed firing positions. Sarah selected the station at the far end of the line, quietly arranging her equipment with methodical care. Unlike the others, who were making elaborate adjustments to their rifles and consulting ballistic charts, she simply removed her rifle from its case and performed a basic function check. Are you going to zero that scope? Marcus called over. Wind's running about 8 miles per hour from the northwest. You'll need to compensate for elevation and drift if you want to hit anything past 300 yards. Thank you, Sarah replied, but made no move to adjust her optics. The morning sun was climbing higher, and the first mirage was beginning to shimmer off the distant hillsides. These heat waves would make accurate shooting more challenging as the day progressed, adding another variable that separated experienced marksmen from amateur enthusiasts. The combination of distance, environmental factors, and equipment demands would test every aspect of a shooter's skill and knowledge. As Elena finished setting up the chronograph and target confirmation system, she looked down the line at her students. 20 years of instruction had taught her to recognize the signs of different experience levels, and nothing about Sarah's preparation suggested someone ready for the challenges ahead. The stage was set for what would become one of the most remarkable demonstrations of marksmanship anyone at Thunder Ridge had ever witnessed. Elena's voice carried across the range as she outlined the morning's protocol. We'll start at 300 yards for warm-up, then move to 500, and finish at 600 if everyone's grouping well. The standard target is a 10-inch steel plate. 5 rounds per distance, the best group wins bragging rights. The morning air was crisp and still, perfect conditions for precision work. Marcus stepped up to the first firing position, his movements fluid and practiced. The crack of his rifle echoed off the mountain walls as he fired his 5-round string. Through the spotting scope, Elena could see tight grouping just left of center, impressive shooting that drew approving nods from the others. Dr. Pemberton followed, his expensive rifle setup gleaming in the morning sun. His shots were methodical, each one preceded by careful calculations and wind readings from his electronic weather station. His group clustered nicely in the upper right quadrant of the target, demonstrating the precision that his equipment investment was designed to deliver. Jake Morrison's turn brought a display of smooth efficiency. His military training showed in every aspect of his technique: breathing control, trigger discipline, follow-through. The distinctive sound of his custom rifle sent 5 rounds downrange in quick succession, each impact visible through the scope as clean hits on steel. Tommy Richardson approached shooting the way his family had for generations, relying on instinct and experience over technology. His worn rifle spoke with authority, placing rounds in a respectable cluster that proved local knowledge of wind and terrain still mattered in precision shooting. When Sarah's turn came, the casual conversations continued around her. She settled behind her rifle with none of the elaborate preparation rituals the others had performed. No ballistic computer, no wind meter readings, no lengthy scope adjustments. She simply chambered around and settled into position. Her first shot at 300 yards struck the target plate with a clear ring, but off to one side. Not a terrible shot for someone obviously new to the game, but nothing that impressed the experienced shooters who had just demonstrated textbook precision. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Little high and right," Elena called out, offering the kind of coaching guidance she provided to all students. "Might want to adjust your hold." Sarah's second shot landed in roughly the same area, confirming what everyone was beginning to suspect. She was struggling with the fundamentals. The third and fourth rounds followed similar patterns, striking the target but scattered across the plate without any apparent pattern or improvement. Marcus shook his head sympathetically. Classic beginner mistakes. Probably jerking the trigger, inconsistent cheek weld. It takes years to develop proper technique. Her fifth shot completed what could charitably be called a mediocre performance. 5 hits on a 10-inch target at 300 yards wasn't embarrassing for a novice, but it was exactly what everyone expected from someone clearly out of their depth. "Not bad for a first-timer," Dr. Pemberton offered diplomatically. "Precision shooting has a steep learning curve. Most people don't realize how many variables are involved." As they moved back to the 500-yard line, the group dynamics became more pronounced. The experienced shooters clustered together, discussing technical adjustments and sharing observations about wind conditions, while Sarah remained quietly focused on her own preparation. At 500 yards, the target plates appeared significantly smaller through the scopes. The increased distance amplified every error in technique, equipment, or environmental reading. This was where the separation between serious marksmen and casual shooters became apparent. Marcus delivered another impressive performance, his rounds clustering in a group small enough to cover with the silver dollar. The others followed with varying degrees of success, but all demonstrated competence that came from years of dedicated practice and quality equipment. Sarah's turn at 500 yards produced results that confirmed everyone's initial assessment. Her shots hit the target, but spread across the plate in what appeared to be random fashion. No discernible pattern, no evidence of learning from previous shots, no adjustment for the increased distance. "Wind's picking up," Tommy observed, though the flags barely showed movement. "Makes it tougher for someone still learning the basics." Jake was more direct in his assessment. "Might want to consider dropping back to 300 yards until you get your fundamentals sorted out. No shame in building skills gradually." Quote. The suggestion was offered kindly, but Sarah simply nodded and continued with her shooting sequence. Her remaining rounds at 500 yards followed the same pattern, hits on target, but nothing approaching the precision the others were demonstrating. Elena checked her watch as they prepared to move to the final distance. 600 yards is where we separate the wheat from the chaff. This is serious long-range work that requires everything to come together perfectly. The walk to the 600-yard line gave everyone time to reflect on the morning's performance. Marcus and Jake were engaged in a technical discussion about barrel harmonics and load development. Dr. Pemberton was making notes in a leather-bound shooting journal, recording environmental conditions and equipment performance data. Sarah walked quietly, carrying her rifle with the casual familiarity that comes from years of handling firearms, though her shooting performance suggested those years hadn't been spent developing precision skills. At 600 yards, the steel targets were barely visible dots, even through quality optics. Success at this distance required not just accuracy, but understanding of ballistic trajectory, wind drift calculation, and the ability to read environmental conditions that could push bullets several inches off target. The experienced shooters approached this challenge with the seriousness it demanded. Equipment checks, wind readings, ballistic calculations. Every detail mattered when engagement ranges pushed the limits of both equipment and skill. Marcus took his position and fired his string with the confidence of someone who had made shots like this countless times before. The impacts were clearly visible through the spotting scope, clustering in the center of the target zone with impressive consistency. Dr. Pemberton's expensive equipment proved its worth at extended range. His computerized ballistic solutions and premium optics delivered precision that justified every dollar of his investment. Each shot landed exactly where his calculations predicted. Jake's military background showed most clearly at long range, where the stakes were highest and margin for error smallest. His shooting reflected the kind of life-or-death precision that military snipers develop through necessity. Tommy's local knowledge proved valuable as always. Reading mountain wind patterns was an art his family had passed down through generations, and his shots reflected understanding that couldn't be purchased or programmed into computers. When Sarah stepped up to the 600-yard line, the morning's pattern seemed likely to continue. Her equipment looked even more inadequate at extended range, where premium optics and precise ammunition became critical factors in success. Her first shot rang the steel but wide left of the intended point of impact. The second shot struck the right side of the plate. The third shot hit low. Her shooting appeared to be getting worse as distances increased, exactly what inexperienced shooters typically experienced when pushed beyond their comfort zones. Probably time to call it a morning, Marcus suggested diplomatically. Long-range shooting isn't something you pick up overnight. Takes serious dedication and the right equipment. But something unusual was happening that none of them had noticed yet. While Sarah's shots appeared scattered and inconsistent to casual observation, each impact was being automatically recorded by the range's electronic scoring system. The computer was tracking not just hits and misses, but precise coordinates of every bullet strike. Data was accumulating in the range computer that would soon reveal something extraordinary about Sarah's apparently mediocre performance. Information that would force everyone to completely reconsider what they thought they had witnessed during the morning's shooting. Elena was reviewing the morning scores on her tablet when the first anomaly appeared. The range's computerized scoring system had been automatically tracking every shot fired, using acoustic sensors and impact detectors to record precise coordinates of bullet strikes. What she saw on the screen made her pause and check the data twice. "That's weird," she muttered, scrolling through the recorded impacts. The system was showing something that didn't match what she had observed through the spotting scope. Marcus noticed her puzzled expression. "Problem with the scoring system?" "Maybe," Elena replied, tapping the screen. "Computer's showing some unusual data patterns. Let me run a system diagnostic." While Elena worked with the scoring computer, the group had moved to the observation deck for coffee and to discuss the morning's shooting. The general consensus was that it had been a successful session, with the experienced shooters demonstrating the kind of precision that justified Thunder Ridge's reputation. "Nothing like mountain air and quality equipment," Dr. Pemberton was saying, carefully cleaning his rifle's barrel with the methodical attention of someone who understood that precision required maintenance. "These conditions really let you see what your setup can do." Jake was studying the distant targets through powerful binoculars. Winds completely died down. Perfect day for long-range work. Shame that not everyone could take advantage of it. Tommy was more philosophical. Everyone's got to start somewhere. The girl showed up, gave it her best shot. That's more than most people ever do. Sarah sat quietly at the edge of the group, drinking coffee from a paper cup and seemingly unbothered by the implied criticism in their comments. Her rifle lay across her lap, and she was examining the scope with the kind of attention someone gives to equipment they're still learning to use. Elena's voice interrupted the conversation. "Guys, I need you to look at something. The computer data isn't matching what I saw through the scope." The group gathered around her tablet as she pulled up the morning's shooting records. The screen displayed a detailed map of each target, with colored dots marking the location of every bullet impact recorded by the system's sensors. "Here's Marcus at 300 yards, she said, pointing to a tight cluster of blue dots. "Excellent group, just like we saw. Jake's shots are here in red, Tommy's in green, Dr. Pemberton's in yellow, all exactly what we observed." She scrolled to a different section of data. "But look at this. Sarah's shots are marked in purple, and the computer is showing something that doesn't make sense." The screen displayed impact points that appeared to overlap in ways that seemed impossible. At 300 yards, what they had observed as scattered shots across the target were being recorded by the system as impacts within fractions of an inch of each other. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. "Has to be a computer glitch. We all saw her shots hitting different parts of the target." "That's what I thought," Elena replied. "But I ran full diagnostics on the acoustic sensors, the impact detectors, even the target monitoring systems. Everything's functioning perfectly." Dr. Pemberton studied the data with the analytical approach he brought to medical diagnosis. "Could be interference from other sources, radio frequencies, electronic equipment, something causing false readings." "Already checked that too," Elena said. "No interference detected. The system is reading clean signals from all sensors." Jake was examining the data more carefully. What about the 500 and 600-yard targets? Same anomaly? Elena scrolled through the records. That's where it gets really strange. At 500 yards, the computer shows even tighter groupings. And at 600 yards... She paused, staring at the screen. This can't be right. The 600-yard data showed impact points clustered so tightly that the computer was having difficulty distinguishing between individual shots. The margin of error was smaller than the scoring system's ability to measure accurately. System malfunction, Marcus said definitively. Has to be. Nobody shoots groups that are tight at 600 yards, especially not with basic hunting equipment. But Elena was already walking toward the range office. I'm calling the manufacturer. This system costs $40,000 and it's supposed to be foolproof. 20 minutes later, she returned with a confused expression and a printed report. Technical support ran remote diagnostics on our system. Everything's operating within normal parameters. They're saying the data is accurate. The group fell silent as the implications began to sink in. If the computer data was correct, then what they had observed through their scopes was somehow wrong. But that seemed impossible. They were all experienced shooters who knew how to read impacts and evaluate marksmanship. Tommy was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. Maybe we should go down to the targets and take a look for ourselves. The walk to the 600-yard target line took 15 minutes across rough terrain. As they approached the steel plates, Elena carried a measuring tape and notepad to document whatever they found. The targets showed clear evidence of multiple impacts, with bright silver marks where bullets had struck the painted steel. Marcus's target displayed the expected pattern, several distinct impact points clustered in the center area, exactly matching what they had observed through the scopes. Jake's target showed similar results, as did Tommy's and Dr. Pemberton's. Clean, separate impact marks that corresponded perfectly with their remembered observations of the morning's shooting. But Sarah's target told a different story entirely. At first glance, it appeared to show the scattered impacts they remembered, multiple silver marks spread across the surface of the steel plate. But as Elena examined the target more closely with a magnifying glass, she discovered something extraordinary. "This doesn't make sense," she said, beckoning the others closer. "Look at this impact mark." Through the magnifying glass, what had appeared to be a single bullet strike was actually revealed as multiple overlapping impacts. The silver mark that looked like one shot was actually several bullets that had struck so close together that they appeared as a single mark to the naked eye. Dr. Pemberton took the magnifying glass and examined the target himself. "That's impossible. You can't get multiple shots that close together without specialized bench rest equipment and match-grade ammunition." Elena was measuring the distances between impact points with precision calipers. These shots are separated by less than half an inch. Some of them are overlapping by more than 80%. Jake was studying the target with the intensity he had once brought to analyzing enemy positions. If this is accurate, then every shot we thought was scattered was actually clustered tighter than most competition shooters achieve with perfect conditions and custom equipment. They moved to examine the 500-yard target, where the pattern repeated itself. What appeared to be random impacts were actually grouped so tightly that individual shots were nearly indistinguishable without magnification and precise measurement. At the 300-yard target, the clustering was even more pronounced. Elena's measurements showed groupings that would have been impressive at 100 yards, let alone at extended ranges with basic equipment. Marcus was shaking his head as he studied the evidence. "This violates everything I know about marksmanship. Nobody shoots groups this tight at these distances without perfect conditions, custom ammunition, and years of competition experience." "Especially not," Dr. Pemberton added quietly, "with a 20-year-old hunting rifle and basic optics." Elena was photographing the targets with her phone, documenting evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions about what was possible in precision shooting. The computer data was right all along. We were wrong about what we were seeing. As they walked back toward the main facility, each member of the group was wrestling with questions that had no easy answers. How had they all been deceived by their own observations? What did it mean that someone could achieve precision that seemed to violate the laws of physics and equipment limitations? Most importantly, who exactly was Sarah Mitchell, and how had she achieved something that seasoned marksmen with decades of experience and premium equipment couldn't begin to match? The morning had started with assumptions about skill, gender, and equipment that seemed obvious and unshakable. Now those assumptions lay in ruins, replaced by mysteries that demanded explanations none of them could provide. The silence that followed their return from the targets was unlike anything Thunder Ridge had experienced. Elena sat at her desk, staring at the photographs of the impossibly tight groupings, while the others occupied chairs around the office in various states of contemplation and disbelief. It was Dr. Pemberton who finally broke the silence. "I need to understand something," he said, turning to Sarah. "What exactly did you do out there?" Sarah had been sitting quietly, her rifle case propped against her chair. She looked up with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the morning. "I shot at the targets." "That's not an answer," Marcus said, though his tone had lost its earlier condescension. "Those groupings are physically impossible with that equipment. I've been shooting competitively for 15 years, and I've never seen anything approaching that level of precision." Jake leaned forward, his military background evident in his direct approach. "Look, we're all professionals here. We know what we saw, and we know what the evidence shows. Those are two different things, which means something else is going on." Sarah considered this for a long moment before responding. "You saw what you expected to see." "What does that mean?" Elena asked. Instead of answering directly, Sarah opened her rifle case and removed her weapon. But now, examining it more closely, the others began to notice details they had missed during their initial assessment. The scope, while appearing basic, bore markings that weren't visible from a distance. The barrel, though showing wear, had characteristics that suggested precision manufacturing rather than factory-standard production. "This rifle," Sarah said, running her hand along the stock, "was built by my grandfather, Harold Mitchell. You might have heard of him." The name hit Elena like a physical blow. Harold Mitchell? Harold Mitchell, who held the world record for long-range precision shooting for 12 years? "The same." Marcus's face went pale. "Harry Mitchell built that rifle? Harry Mitchell was your grandfather?" Sarah nodded. "He designed this system in 1987 for a military contract that never materialized. The scope looks basic because it was meant to appear that way. The internal mechanisms are different from commercial equipment." Dr. Pemberton was studying the rifle with new eyes. "What is the difference?" "The scope has gyroscopic stabilization and environmental compensation systems that were 40 years ahead of their time when he built them. The barrel uses a harmonic dampening system that essentially eliminates mechanical variables that affect accuracy." She paused, allowing this information to sink in before continuing. "But the real breakthrough was in the ammunition. Grandpa developed a load that maintains ballistic consistency across temperature and altitude variations that would normally affect precision." Jake was staring at the rifle as if seeing it for the first time. "You're telling us this is some kind of prototype precision system?" "The only one ever built," Sarah confirmed. "He made it for me when I was 16, using techniques and materials that the industry still hasn't adopted 20 years later." Elena was connecting pieces of information that had been scattered throughout the morning. "But why the deception? Why let us think you were struggling?" Sarah's expression became more serious. "Because I wanted to see how you would react to someone who didn't fit your expectations. How you would treat a young woman with basic-looking equipment who wasn't performing obviously well." The room fell silent as the implications of her words settled over the group. Each of them was remembering their comments, their assumptions, their casual dismissal of her abilities. "This was a test," Marcus said quietly. "In a way, yes, but not the kind you think." Sarah began reassembling her rifle with practiced efficiency. "I'm here because Thunder Ridge is being considered for a government contract. A contract that requires training personnel to identify and develop exceptional marksmanship talent, regardless of how that talent presents itself." Elena's eyes widened. "The Department of Defense evaluation we're being considered for?" "Among others, the military has learned that some of their best snipers don't look like what people expect. They're often quiet, unassuming individuals who get overlooked because they don't fit traditional stereotypes." Dr. Pemberton was beginning to understand. "And you were evaluating whether we could recognize genuine skill when it didn't come with obvious credentials or expensive equipment?" "Partly, but I was also testing whether your facility creates an environment where people feel comfortable demonstrating their abilities, or whether social dynamics prevent actual talent development." Jake was studying Sarah with the analytical approach he brought to tactical situations. "What's your background? Military? CIA? Some kind of special operation?" Defense contractor. I specialize in marksmanship evaluation and training program development. I've designed precision shooting curricula for agencies that most people have never heard of. Sarah stood and shouldered her rifle case. The precision you witnessed today isn't just about equipment. It's about understanding that accuracy has multiple components: physical, mental, and technological. Most training programs focus on only one or two of those elements. What do you mean? Elena asked. Physical technique can be taught to almost anyone with adequate time and instruction. Mental discipline comes from understanding your own psychological responses under pressure. But technological advantage, she gestured to her rifle case, comes from understanding what's actually possible when engineering excellence meets practical application. Marcus was still processing what he had learned. Those shots you made, the groupings we measured, that's not humanly possible without assistance. You're right, which is why the military is interested in training programs that incorporate technological assistance rather than pretending it doesn't exist. Future warfare will be fought with equipment that makes today's systems look primitive. She paused at the door, looking back at the group. But the most important factor in developing effective marksmen isn't equipment or even technique. It's creating environments where people feel valued regardless of their background, gender, or initial appearance. Dr. Pemberton stood up. What happens now? Did we pass your evaluation? Sarah smiled for the first time that day. That depends on what changes you make based on what you learned today. The contract requires facilities that can identify and develop talent that might be overlooked by traditional assessment methods. Quote, and if we don't make changes, Elena asked, then the contract goes to a facility that understands that the best shooters don't always look like what people expect them to look like. They're often the quiet ones who get dismissed before they have a chance to demonstrate what they're capable of. She opened the door and stepped outside, then turned back one final time. The military has learned that diversity isn't just about fairness, it's about operational effectiveness. They need marksmen who can think differently, approach problems from unique perspectives, and perform under conditions that would challenge conventional thinking. Thank you, Elena said quietly, for the lesson and for the opportunity. Sarah nodded. The report will be submitted next week. What it says will depend on how Thunder Ridge evolves from this point forward. As she walked toward her vehicle, the group remained in Elena's office, each wrestling with the profound implications of what they had experienced. Their assumptions about skill, gender, equipment, and evaluation had been systematically dismantled by someone who had appeared to be exactly what they expected her to be, until she proved to be something entirely different. The transformation at Thunder Ridge began within hours of Sarah's departure. Elena convened an emergency staff meeting that afternoon, gathering not just the morning's participants, but all of the academy's instructors and administrative personnel. The conference room had never felt quite so tense as she began recounting the day's extraordinary events. We need to fundamentally reassess how we evaluate incoming students, Elena announced without preamble. Today proved that our current methods are not just inadequate. They're actively preventing us from recognizing exceptional talent. Marcus sat quietly as Elena described the morning's revelations. The knowledge that he had dismissed someone whose grandfather was a legend in precision shooting weighed heavily on him. Harold Mitchell's techniques were still studied in advanced marksmanship courses, and his innovations had influenced rifle design for decades. Dr. Pemberton was taking notes with the same methodical approach he brought to medical procedures. We need to establish new protocols immediately. If this was an official evaluation for a government contract, our current assessment methods could cost us the opportunity entirely. Quote, Jake was studying the target photographs Elena had distributed around the table. Even knowing the truth, it was difficult to accept that the scattered impacts they had observed were actually grouped more tightly than most competition shooters achieved. This changes everything about how we approach student evaluation. Within the week, Thunder Ridge had implemented a comprehensive overhaul of their assessment procedures. The traditional approach of evaluating students based on immediate performance was replaced with a multi-stage system designed to identify potential that might not be immediately obvious. Elena developed new intake protocols that required instructors to work with each student individually before making any judgments about capability. Equipment assessment became more sophisticated, recognizing that custom or modified systems might not appear impressive to casual observation but could deliver superior performance. The cultural shift was perhaps even more significant than the procedural changes. Tommy Richardson, whose family had been shooting these mountains for generations, approached Elena with an unexpected proposal. "I want to bring my daughter to the next session. She's been asking about precision shooting, and I've been telling her it wasn't really suitable for girls." "What changed your mind?" Elena asked. "Seeing what happened today. Realizing that I might be wrong about a lot of things I thought I knew for certain." Dr. Pemberton made even more dramatic changes to his approach. As a surgeon, he was accustomed to working with precision instruments, but his experience with Sarah had made him reconsider how he evaluated both equipment and technique. He began researching custom ammunition development and discovered that many innovations in precision shooting had come from unexpected sources. Marcus's transformation was the most profound. As a former military instructor himself, he had built his reputation on the ability to assess marksmanship potential quickly and accurately. Sarah's demonstration had shattered his confidence in those abilities, forcing him to confront the possibility that his expertise was more limited than he had realized. He spent the following weeks reviewing his previous student evaluations, looking for patterns where he might have missed potential. The process was humbling, revealing instances where he had dismissed students who might have developed into exceptional marksmen given different encouragement and instruction. The changes at Thunder Ridge attracted attention throughout the precision shooting community. Word spread quickly about the facility that had revolutionized their evaluation methods after a single extraordinary demonstration. Other training facilities began sending representatives to observe the new protocols and assess whether similar changes might benefit their own programs. Elena found herself fielding calls from military training centers, law enforcement academies, and competitive shooting organizations, all seeking to understand how Thunder Ridge had identified assessment gaps that other facilities had missed. The morning that had begun with routine instruction had become a case study in recognizing hidden talent. 3 weeks after Sarah's visit, Elena received an encrypted email that simply read, "Initial assessment complete. Implementing recommended changes demonstrates institutional adaptability. Phase 2 evaluation scheduled for next month. Different evaluator, different scenario. -SM." The message made clear that Sarah's visit had been only the beginning of Thunder Ridge's evaluation process. The facility would face additional tests, each designed to assess different aspects of their training philosophy and methods. Elena shared the message with her senior staff during their weekly planning meeting. The knowledge that they were under ongoing evaluation created a sense of urgency about implementing changes thoroughly, rather than superficially. "We're not just changing our procedures," Elena explained. "We're changing our fundamental understanding of how talent development works in precision shooting." Jake had been researching Sarah's background through his military contacts. The information he discovered was both impressive and sobering. She's designed training programs for units that don't officially exist. Her work has influenced marksmanship instruction across multiple branches of the military. Which means, Dr. Pemberton added, that the standards we're being evaluated against are significantly higher than we initially understood. The financial implications of the government contract had not been lost on any of them. The multi-year agreement would represent the largest contract in Thunder Ridge's history, providing funding for facility expansion and equipment upgrades that would position them as the premier precision shooting academy in the region. But beyond the financial considerations, the evaluation process had forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about their own biases and limitations. The assumption that expertise would be immediately recognizable had proven not just wrong, but counterproductive to their mission of developing marksmen. Marcus began developing new instructor training protocols based on what they had learned. "We need to train ourselves to look for indicators of potential rather than immediate performance. Some of the best shooters might take months to demonstrate their capabilities." Elena established partnerships with local shooting clubs and high school programs, specifically seeking to identify young women who might be interested in precision shooting but had been discouraged by traditional attitudes about the sport. The changes attracted notice from unexpected quarters. A representative from the Olympic Training Center contacted Elena about potential collaboration in identifying and developing athletes for international competition. The precision shooting sports were evolving rapidly, and Thunder Ridge's new approach to talent identification aligned with emerging best practices in athletic development. Dr. Pemberton leveraged his medical background to develop new approaches to marksmanship training that incorporated understanding of vision, motor control, and cognitive processing. His interdisciplinary approach attracted attention from sports medicine researchers studying the physiological aspects of precision performance. The transformation at Thunder Ridge became a model for how established institutions could adapt to new understanding without losing their core mission. Rather than abandoning their commitment to excellence, they had expanded their definition of what excellence could look like and how it might be developed. As Elena reviewed the facility's progress 6 weeks after Sarah's visit, she realized that the morning's events had accomplished something more significant than just changing their evaluation procedures. They had fundamentally altered Thunder Ridge's culture in ways that would benefit every future student who walked through their doors. 2 years later, Thunder Ridge Precision Academy had become something unprecedented in the world of marksmanship training. The facility that had once catered primarily to experienced male shooters now hosted the most diverse student body in the industry, with participants ranging from teenagers discovering their potential to seasoned professionals seeking advanced techniques. The government contract had been awarded 6 months after Sarah's evaluation, bringing with it resources that transformed Thunder Ridge into a research and development center for precision shooting innovation. The facility now operated specialized programs for military personnel, law enforcement agencies, Olympic hopefuls, and civilian enthusiasts who might never have been welcomed under the old system. Elena stood in her expanded office, reviewing applications for the upcoming advanced instruction course. Among the candidates was Maria Santos, a 19-year-old college student whose only shooting experience came from a high school air rifle program. 2 years earlier, such an application would have been politely declined. Now Elena saw potential that traditional metrics couldn't measure. The changes had attracted attention from educational researchers studying bias and skill assessment across multiple disciplines. Thunder Ridge had become an unexpected case study in how institutional transformation could occur when organizations confronted their own limitations honestly and systematically. Dr. Pemberton had leveraged his experience into a consulting practice that helped other training facilities implement similar assessment reforms. His medical background proved invaluable in developing evaluation methods that recognized different types of motor control, visual processing, and cognitive approaches that could contribute to exceptional marksmanship. The key insight, he explained to visiting researchers, was understanding that expertise often develops along pathways that don't conform to expected patterns. Some of our best students now are people who would have been overlooked entirely under our previous system. Marcus had undergone perhaps the most dramatic personal transformation. His experience with Sarah had forced him to confront assumptions that had shaped his entire approach to instruction. He now served as Thunder Ridge's Director of Student Assessment, specializing in identifying potential in unexpected places. His new role had led to remarkable discoveries. Jennifer Walsh, a 45-year-old librarian with no prior shooting experience, had developed into one of the facility's most precise long-range marksmen. David Chen, a 16-year-old with mild autism who struggled with social interaction, demonstrated an intuitive understanding of ballistics that impressed even senior instructors. I spent 20 years thinking I knew how to evaluate shooting potential, Marcus reflected during a staff meeting. Now I realize I was only seeing a narrow slice of what's actually possible. Jake Morrison had channeled his military background into developing specialized programs for veterans transitioning to civilian careers. His understanding of how military training could both help and hinder adaptation to different shooting environments proved invaluable for students from diverse backgrounds. Tommy Richardson's perspective had evolved in ways that surprised his own family. His daughter Rebecca had not only joined the academy but had progressed to national-level competition within 18 months. Her success had opened his eyes to possibilities he had never considered for any member of his family. Turns out my assumptions about who could shoot weren't just wrong, he admitted to Elena. They were preventing my own daughter from discovering something she's genuinely gifted at. The facility's success had generated interest from technology companies developing next-generation shooting systems. Engineers visited regularly to study how human factors and equipment capabilities intersected in ways that traditional design approaches had missed. Sarah's influence extended far beyond Thunder Ridge. The principles she had demonstrated, looking beyond surface appearances, questioning established assumptions, and creating inclusive environments for talent development, had been adopted by training facilities across the country. Her second evaluation had arrived unannounced 8 months after the first, this time involving an elderly man with Parkinson's disease who achieved impossible accuracy through adaptive techniques that compensated for physical limitations. The lesson reinforced Thunder Ridge's commitment to recognizing expertise wherever it might emerge. Elena had received word that Sarah was developing a comprehensive training manual based on her evaluation work at multiple facilities. The document would become the standard reference for assessment methods in precision shooting, incorporating lessons learned from observing how different institutions adapted to new understanding. The transformation had attracted students from unexpected demographics. Corporate executives sought precision shooting as a form of stress management that required total focus and mental discipline. Artists and musicians discovered that marksmanship training enhanced their understanding of fine motor control and concentration. Physical therapists began referring patients to Thunder Ridge as part of rehabilitation programs, recognizing that precision shooting could help rebuild coordination and confidence in controlled environments. The facility had evolved from a specialized training center into a resource for anyone seeking to understand human potential in high-precision activities. International delegations visited regularly to study Thunder Ridge's methods. Shooting federations from countries seeking to improve their competitive programs sent representatives to observe assessment techniques that had proven more effective than traditional approaches. The academic community had taken notice as well. Psychology researchers studied how bias affected expert judgment, using Thunder Ridge's transformation as evidence that even highly trained professionals could miss obvious talent when it presented outside expected parameters. Elena often reflected on the morning that had changed everything. A single demonstration lasting less than an hour had revealed fundamental flaws in systems that had operated unchallenged for decades. The lesson extended far beyond marksmanship into questions about how society identified and developed human potential. The story of Sarah's evaluation had become legendary within the precision shooting community. New instructors learned it as part of their training, understanding that their role involved not just teaching technique but recognizing capability that might not announce itself obviously. Students arriving at Thunder Ridge now entered an environment where their background, gender, age, or equipment would not determine their potential for success. The focus had shifted from immediate performance to underlying capacity for growth and development. Marcus often told new instructors that the most important lesson was simple: never assume you know what someone is capable of based on first impressions. The quiet person with basic equipment might be the most skilled individual you'll ever meet. The broader implications resonated across industries where expert judgment determined opportunity and advancement. Thunder Ridge had proven that institutional change was possible when organizations committed to examining their own limitations honestly. Elena's final reflection captured the transformation's significance. We learned that excellence doesn't always look like what we expect it to look like. Sometimes the most extraordinary capabilities are hidden behind ordinary appearances, waiting for someone wise enough to look beyond the surface. The legacy lived on in every student who discovered abilities they never knew they possessed, in every instructor who learned to see potential rather than just performance, and in every person who understood that true expertise often emerges from the most unexpected places. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.